the black market egg and sperm donation group.
There's also an app.
An app.
Yes, I won't tell you what the name of the app is. It's like Tinder for sperm and egg donors and surrogates. Like literally you swipe across people and
What is on
and
the
you can match.
profile?
Oh, I mean, like think of any dating app.
Australia has a shortage of donor eggs and sperm, and supply is not keeping up with demand. Donors in Australia can't be paid, and their gift means families who might not otherwise be able to have a family get a chance. But what happens when a donor regrets donating? While it is reportedly only a tiny fraction of people, it can have a huge personal impact. Today, we dig into donor regret. So when I think about wild donation stories, it usually involves a turkey baster. But you went on a tangent that I had never considered about donation before. And you were looking into donor regret.
Yes.
So where did this come from? How did you come across it?
I saw this post that really touched my heart. I know that sounds really contrived, but it really kind of stopped me in my tracks of my workday. This woman put a post out asking other people who had donated their eggs how they felt looking back on their life and thinking about the children that may have come from that donation. And she told this incredible story about how she decided to donate in the 90s. And she was 26. She was kind of just like living her life and had this moment where she was walking past a hospital and she stopped and thought how challenging it would be if you wanted so badly to have children, but your body wouldn't allow it. And she literally just marched into the hospital, signed herself up, and a couple of weeks later had started the process for egg donation. And this was in the 90s when it was far less common. She ended up donating about, I think, 38 eggs, always anticipating that she would have children herself, but then later on never able to bear children. And this post kind of expressed the wishful thinking and this unfulfilled dream, having given that gift to someone else and having never been able to experience herself.
That is really hard. Could she ever go back and kind of get the eggs that she donated, or was that an issue? You're looking at me like it is.
So because of the way that IVF was originally restricted and was only available to hetero couples, when she felt like she was in the right place to try to have kids, she was like out of shitty relationships where she knew it wasn't the right like person to have a child with, and the laws had changed, so single women and queer couples were finally allowed access to IVF in Victoria, where she was based. She was in her early 40s and she went and did one round of IVF treatment, and it was unsuccessful and she couldn't afford to do another one. And she doesn't hold any remorse. She just holds a lot of like wondering.
Was she ever able to go back and see whether other people conceived with her eggs?
So she tells this story when she was back in the 90s, she was in the hospital, she donated the eggs. She was told that a transfer was happening to, like, her eggs were being fertilized and then transferred to another couple. And she actually called the hospital I think like a year later, and she was told twin girls were born from her egg donation. And I think that's the thing that's always stuck around in her head, is wondering, you know, if that was correct and where those women are now. And she's bought a DNA test to try and find some of her donor offspring, but she just hasn't done it yet.
It makes me think about how much contact you have once you donate. Does anyone have a responsibility to tell you, yes, like you did this altruistically, it was something that you really wanted, you made something that most people would consider to be a big gift?
Contribution,
whatever you want to call it. Does anyone come back and say, thank you, this has happened, we're from the hospital, twins have been born?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So donors should be informed when a child is born from their donation if they go through the like IVF clinics and like sperm and egg banks, when we're just specific to Australia. We used to have this whole system of unknown donors, but now the donors have to be known. So by the time the offspring is 18, then they can receive information, particularly health data, about their donor. And that's been a huge change in the industry. And one of the main reasons for that also is to prioritize donor-conceived children. Donors now have to agree to being contacted by their offspring in the future. So there's no such thing as unknown donors in Australia anymore. Even though a donor child might not know who their donor is for the first 18 years, they will eventually have access to know who they are in the future.
So why do you think there is more of a demand for any kind of donation?
Yeah, so many reasons. So one is we're having children later, and as you have children later, your fertility also declines. So there's more of an increase of people needing to use IVF treatments. Also, since the laws around who's allowed to use IVF changed in the last, I guess, decade or so, single women and queer couples were allowed to access IVF, so that adds more demand. And also, so many IVF doctors I've spoken to have said single women coming who are sick of dating, just ready to have a kid themselves, they are like a massive sector of the demand.
And it's probably more socially acceptable now to even go down that path.
Exactly
so
right.
You're
the taboos.
connecting like 5 pools of people who have never had this option available to them.
Yeah, and I guess IVF is also becoming more affordable. There are now like it used to be just available to people who were getting cancer treatment and people who had fertility restrictions, whereas it's become far more accessible now and I guess cheaper. We have like government subsidies now where you can get like a Medicare refund to be able to access this IVF treatment, which makes sense to me when we have a declining birth rate.
So before you said something about if they get eggs or sperm through a bank, tell me about the alternative way people are getting sperm and eggs and all of that.
So Australia has a pretty big donor shortage, and what's happening here is like Australia's sperm banks and egg banks just can't keep up with demand. And that's for a bunch of reasons. A, there's just like a lot more people who need donor eggs or sperm or gametes than there are people ready to donate them. Also, in Australia, you can't get paid to donate. And particularly when it comes to donating eggs, that's like a really involved process. Like you've got to do essentially like an IVF round. You're taking hormones every day. You then have to go into a day surgery, get your eggs extracted. It's like a whole thing. So while in America, people can get paid tens of thousands of dollars for that, in Australia, you have to do it out of the goodness of your own heart. And that's not a very common thing, understandably. So there are these Facebook groups where people essentially put up profiles asking or hoping that someone with the goodness of their heart, a stranger, will donate their DNA to help these people on the internet help start a family. And the IVF industry warns a lot about this kind of black market sperm and egg donation that happens in Australia. But a lot of people do it because IVF can cost a lot of money. And if you buy eggs from overseas, they can cost like 30 grand. And if you buy sperm from overseas, it can also cost quite a bit of money. And also Australian sperm and eggs just isn't keeping up with demand. So people are doing what they can by just like hoping they find good people on the internet.
Do you think if they monetized it, there would be a
This is a big topic. I think the risk with monetizing selling your sperm and eggs is that, people could do it for the perceived wrong reasons. Now, I've spoken to some fertility specialists who say, you're going through quite a big process. It's like it's a big psychological process. You also have to go through the counseling. Everything has to be above board. Papers need to be signed. You have to go through huge like health tests.
Someone might come to you in 18 years.
Exactly. Yeah, there's a lot to go through. So for some people, it makes sense to financially incentivize them, particularly when, if you're donating your eggs, you're probably having to get blood tests every second or third day, and you're going to have to take time off work, the whole thing. Yeah.
It would boost the numbers.
Yeah.
I mean, whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, it seems like that's debatable.
Yeah.
So the black market egg and sperm donation groups on Facebook just seem really interesting.
There's also an app.
An app?
Yeah, it's
Tell
called,
me about the app.
it's like Tinder for sperm and egg donors and surrogates. Like literally you swipe across people and
What is on
and
the
you can match.
profile?
Oh, I mean, like think of any dating app, very similar mix of people. You know, some people they're really, you know, with their full heart, with the best of intentions, and others with not pure intentions by any stretch.
That's a good analogy.
Also, there's international people on there who are trying to sell their sperm, and which is illegal in Australia.
So what brings people to donate?
So many factors. I spoke to this one woman who actually donated her embryo, so what would be considered her biological child, with her and her husband. And she absolutely regrets donating that embryo. And she's essentially now watching someone else bring up this child in a way that she personally doesn't agree with.
How do you go to donate an embryo? Because I think you hear about egg and sperm donations, but how does one donate an embryo?
Yeah, well, you know, so many people do IVF now. And she and her husband had done a round of IVF. They got 2 embryos, so with her husband's sperm and her egg, and they had 1 child. The other embryo was left in the freezer, and they started bringing up this child, and they found maybe they were just going to be a 1-child family, but they wanted their child to kind of have contact with this other frozen future sibling, essentially. So they found this couple who was looking for actually an egg donor but was very willing to take an embryo. They went through all the formal processes via the IVF clinic to donate this embryo to this other couple. They all had the counselling that they were supposed to have. But looking back on that time, the woman that I spoke to feels that she actually had postnatal depression. And so she thinks she wouldn't have made the same decision knowing what she does now. And she also felt like she didn't know enough about the donor-conceived rights of children. And so she's watching this child be brought up by another couple and, yeah, feeling really torn about it, but there's nothing she can do.
Once they've donated, they have like a relationship afterwards. Is that common?
I would say it's really uncommon. It tends to be more common in the queer community from what I understand.
Do you know anything about how close they were? Did they kind of go and play tennis together and find out, oh, I like the style under pressure of these 2 parents?
Yeah, no, they met online, but they had a lot of things in common. All the boxes were ticked for them. And I guess ultimately the most important thing in the relationship was that the siblings knew each other, and the siblings do know each other.
Yeah, it sounds like she has her hands tied and that it's a challenging situation and there's no real way to win it. Is there anything in place that preempts this if you were to regret your donation?
Well, this is the thing about like the black market versus the like official market. So if I were to donate my eggs through an IVF clinic, I would go through psychological counseling. If I was donating them to you, you would go through counseling as well. We would go through counseling together, and
Everyone gets
counseling.
You get counseling. You get counseling.
But the whole point of that is to make sure everyone's on the same page, and so you can make an informed decision in that time, because I guess that could mitigate like feelings of regret in the future. But I've thought about this so much, and I don't think you actually can mitigate for the experience of regret in egg donation or sperm donation or in life at all. We've set up a lot of systems to try and prevent it, but I think this is just a fact of life. And I spoke to this one academic in fertility, and she had spoken to a lot of women who had donated their eggs, and they said they'd wished they'd also had the counseling after they'd made the donation. It almost felt like there was so much kind of information and checking in the lead up and during the donation, but afterwards, like, you know, what about years later when you're down the track and you are like that woman who donated their eggs 20, 30 years ago and you can't have kids? How then do you look back on that decision?